Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Seth Meyers, clinical psychologist. And in this video, I'm going to continue the video series that I've done on controlling personalities, the controlling person in your life. Now, this specific video will talk about the controlling person at work, specifically a controlling boss that you may have or you may have had in the past and can cause really a lot of frustration in your life. Other videos I've done on controlling personalities refer to this personality in a romantic relationship or maybe in a family relationship that you've got. But this one, we're going to be talking about the controlling boss. So, to begin, let's talk about some of the examples of controlling behavior that a boss can engage in. One of the number one ways that a controlling boss is controlling is with your time. And one of the things that they do is they often question your time or your use of time. So let's imagine that you have your work calendar, and there is often a high scrutinizing of your calendar, what you put in your calendar, and there is a questioning of whether you make good use of your time, whether you are efficient with your time. That is one of the main ways that a controlling boss is controlling. Another way that has to do with time, that a controlling boss can be controlling, has to do with the time that you spend at your desk. So, a lot of times, a controlling boss wants to be able to watch over you, almost as if they're sort of lording over you, keeping an eye on you as if you're a child or, someone who might need to be penalized if you do one false move. So a lot of times there is this controlling where you spend your time at work. You may be up from your desk for 5 or 7 minutes and, doing something completely legitimate or, God forbid, even going to the bathroom. And you may be asked about that, questioned about that, in particularly a tone of voice that sounds doubting. And that voice is meant to send a message to you that they don't trust you, they doubt you, and that you need to be on guard because almost as if you are being watched. So that is another way that a controlling boss is controlling with your time, the time you spend at their desk where they can keep a watchful eye over you. And yet, a third way that a controlling boss may be controlling with your time specifically has to do with requests that you make for time off. Now, you could have time in the bank that is completely legitimately yours to use. You know that this is a time that shouldn't be a problem for you to take off. This isn't a high coverage concern or anything like that. But there is the waiting to approve time off and using that really as a tool of control over you. Another way the controlling bosses can try to control you is through attention. With attention, specifically the amount of attention that you give them. If you have a really emotionally unhealthy boss, that boss sometimes will have a need for socialization, for friends, for listening, to have an audience. If you are a boss who has a lot of unmet emotional needs in your personal life and you want attention, you want people to listen to you, you want to feel important, you like that you get to decide when the conversation ends, not the other person, there is no better person in the mind of that person to exploit than your subordinate. So, a lot of times, a controlling boss will control the attention that you pay to them, and they will come into your office and sit for a long period of time, often even talking about things that don't necessarily even have to do with work. And of course, because you are their subordinate, you may feel like you can't say no. You can't say, listen, I really have work to do that I need to focus on. You're afraid with this kind of controlling personality, of course, that if you were to try to draw some boundaries or express your own needs, that you would get punished. So this is one of the most common ways that a controlling boss is controlling, to try to control the amount of attention that you are forced to give them. Another way that a controlling boss can be controlling with you is a way that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. It's one of the ways that is a little more subtle. It's not so obvious or clear cut as, trying to watch over you and make sure you don't leave your desk for 5 minutes and making you feel like you need to answer to someone when you do. No, this behavior that I'm going to be talking about is a little more nuanced. And I am talking about the words that you say in meetings with others, especially imagine you are in meetings with other individuals from the company, other divisions. And so if your boss is in that meeting with you and you speak, that is seen by the controlling boss a lot of times as a threat to their own power, as if, who are you to talk like that? Who are you to talk as if you are in such a position of power and authority? And so during meetings, when you try to share feedback in meetings with others, your boss may give you the sort of look, a sort of side eye, and send this message to you. What are you going to say? I'm watching what you say. I'm guarding every word that you say. And this is really intended to make you feel insecure and to keep you in a very subordinate position. So this is a behavior to watch out for. When a controlling boss even tries to control the words that come out of your mouth, as legitimate and important as they may be in a meeting with others. Next, I'm going to talk about one of the biggest and most frustrating ways that a controlling boss can be controlling with you at work. And that has to do with giving you feedback that suggests that there is one right or correct way to do something, even when most people would understand that this is what is called a stylistic difference. There is not necessarily just one way, one correct or accurate or right way to do many things. It's really just a matter of a stylistic difference. You may do it this way, another person may do it that way, and who's to say really who is right? Well, with the controlling boss, the problem is their position is that they are right. And so a lot of times a controlling boss will take an example of something where there isn't just one correct answer, but send a message to you that it is their way to do it, and that any other way, and specifically your way, was wrong. Now, what's important in that situation is for you to remember, actually, this is a really stylistic difference. There isn't just one way to do this, but to think to yourself, well, if this is what they need, if this is the story they're telling themselves, then it's just easier to go along with it than to fight them on it. But a lot of times a controlling boss will not accept that these are stylistic differences. What they tell themselves is there's one right way and it's their way. This often gets reflected in things that are written, maybe press releases, reports that include narrative sections. This may include marketing materials, but the point is there is this sort of idea that there's really only one way to do it, and that really, let's hope that you make the right decisions and that you do it the correct way. Because if not, the boss is saying to you through their implicit messages, I'm going to create some anxiety and a little fear in you so that you're always wondering if you are doing this job well enough. And in fact, to some extent, even if your job is safe here. And finally, I'm going to talk about one last way that a controlling boss can be controlling with their employees. And it is an especially upsetting one that can really make employees feel uncomfortable. And that has to do with being very watchful over who you develop work platonic relationships with. So keep in mind, and I've talked about this in my other videos on the controlling personality, the controlling personality is also a distrusting personality. The controlling personality wants to have a degree of power over you, and they feel inherently nervous and insecure about who you may develop alliances with. With controlling bosses, they often actually have this underlying fear of their own power being subordinated. they almost have this fear as if there might be an overthrow. I mean, things get so dramatic in their mind. This isn't like a revolutionary army, it's just work. But for the individual who is controlling, they need so much control and order in their world that most people probably can't really understand what it's like to live inside that mind of theirs. But the point is that they are afraid often of alliances and being overthrown and being subordinated in all different types of ways. And if they see you, their employee, developing alliances with others, they see that as a threat. And so, one of the things that a controlling boss will often do with employees is try to limit the people that their employees have access to. They don't really want them developing relationships, especially with people in other divisions, especially with people in higher positions of power. There is almost this insecurity and really almost paranoia a lot of times with this personality. Some specific examples of this include watching your calendar extremely closely and trying to figure out who you are meeting with, because anyone is a potential threat to the control that they have over their little area at work. Anyone can be a threat. So they may be guarding, watching your calendar and who you meet with. They may be watching particularly closely who you have lunch with, who you maybe walk to work with, or take breaks with. All of that is watched keenly. So I hope talking about some of these behaviors and really highlighting the different ways that a controlling boss can be controlling with you has been helpful. Now, the next question, of course, is what to do about it. What do you do once you have identified this pattern? It's really important that you talk to your friends or anyone you live with and make sure that you vent to them. It's really important that you feel validation for the frustration that you're having to deal with. That's a really important part. Ask yourself if you can talk to your boss about this without saying the word controlling, because that is such a triggering label that can make your boss feel very defensive. But maybe to come up with a couple of examples of things that maybe make you feel stressed out. That's something that's legitimate for you to think about. Ask yourself. Also, make sure that whenever you talk about anything with your boss, that you have a sense that you can trust that there won't be retaliation. You don't want to be punished. You don't want penalties. You probably very likely need your livelihood to pay all your bills. So you want to make sure that you protect yourself. And then lastly, of course, you need to ask yourself very honestly if this is a job that's going to work out for you, if you are going to be able over the long term to work with this personality. A lot of people in similar situations have found that they serve themselves better to simply start looking for another position. So again, I hope this has been helpful. If it has, please like this video. We talk about this issue in my podcast, also Insight with Dr. Seth. And not long ago, I actually just interviewed someone about power dynamics in the employer-employee relationship. I interviewed a leadership expert, and one of the things she said is that really good bosses need to think about the way they define power, because there is good power and there is bad power. So it's really important for you as an employee to find yourself in the position of a work situation where you feel like you can harness really good, healthy, productive power, as opposed to you being on the receiving end of bad power. So have a good day, and I wish you all the best as you deal with these circumstances.